Welcome to LSCDS Speaks. This is a new initiative by LSCDS with the goal of enhancing professional development for students and postdocs. My name is Maria, and I will be your host as we talk about all things in professional development to help you make the next career move. So in our second episode, I will be sitting down with our special guest, Gina Parker, to discuss mentorship. Gina is an emerging leader in the medical device industry, where she helps Fortune 500 companies enhance their problem-solving capabilities to foster a quality culture based on continuous improvement. Gina is passionate about her own career growth, as well as helping others with their career journeys. Keep listening to learn how to foster an organic mentor-mentee relationship. And as with all relationships, communication and fit are key. But before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors, BioRender and MMPA, the Masters of Management and Professional Accounting at U of T, for making this episode possible. Hi, Gina. Welcome to LSCDS Speaks. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for being here today on our second episode. So we'll be talking about mentees and mentors in this episode. And so I wanted to ask you a general question to understand what this means to you. And I was wondering what first comes to mind for you when I say the word mentorship.
Interesting question. So I think I'm somebody who's constantly learning from the people around me. So whether it's an informal or formal type of mentorship, the first thing that comes to mind is that you can learn something from every single person that you come into contact with. So I think that I've got a little bit more of an informal approach to mentorship, and I'm constantly reminded of that through these kinds of discussions, especially with questions like that.
I think that's great. Like that lifelong learner approach to your career is very important, and learning from people that have more experience can really help you shape your career. Would you mind talking about your experiences with mentorship, either being a mentee or a mentor?
Yeah, so I've been a mentor. So I've been asked to be a mentor by a few different people. And then I've also participated in a few different mentorship programs where I've been reached out to and asked to participate in either something like this, like for the University of Toronto, or for even my alumni association for Carleton University. And I think that the best experiences that I've had with mentorship have been kind of organically formed. And that's when somebody just reaches out to me out of the blue and says, hey, I really like what you're doing, or I like what you've been up to. I'd love to have a coffee or learn a little bit more. That's been primarily where I've seen kind of the most benefit out of those types of relationships. And that's been kind of what I've been up to for the past couple of years, just helping out as asked and as needed.
That's great. Has this been mostly through things like LinkedIn or through your company itself?
Actually, it's been people that I've previously known. So it'll be somebody that I either went to school with or had run into at, like, maybe I would say the university definitely was a good spot to find people. And then people who I was previously acquainted with through different organizations. That's been kind of the primary input source to the people who have reached out to me. And I'll have them on like LinkedIn, but I'll also have them on like Instagram. Like it'll be kind of somebody who I know a little bit better than somebody who's just on LinkedIn or just somebody that I work with. And those have been the ones that have lasted the longest.
That's great. I think, yeah, having that initial connection, I think, helps you build that relationship. Do you find, I guess, in terms of either the mentee's experience or your own, has that ever helped you build on your career, or have you given them any advice that has really helped shape their career?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm learning from everybody around me at all times. So as we're kind of interacting, you always pick up on little nuggets. And I like to kind of use the philosophy, or at least embody the philosophy, that every single person is an expert in something that you know nothing about. And so regardless of whether or not it's somebody who's a mentee or I'm mentoring who's younger than me, or it's somebody who might be older than me, or regardless of kind of different demographics, there's always something to be learned. So I try to carry that through in those conversations and in those relationships as much as possible, just being really open-minded and knowing that, like, I'm not the one who knows everything, nor will I ever be the one who knows everything. And I think that that's okay to lean on other people for the answers that we're looking for sometimes.
So why did you really, it seems like you really like learning, and is that one of the reasons you became a mentor, or were there other factors that contributed to it?
I think just at the most bare foundation, like the reason why I became a mentor is because somebody asked me to be a mentor. I've always loved coaching people and growing with people, and that's why I also enjoy being a people leader. And but the actual formal kind of interaction and relationship of mentorship really came about just because somebody asked. And I think I really care about people, and I like to see people grow, and I like to see people who are interested in growing. And I feel a profound amount of joy when I see people succeed. And so I like to watch that. So people who know me or who have watched me for a little while kind of know that, and they can play on that. So when somebody asked, hey, can you mentor me for X, Y, and Z? I would say, of course, because that's just kind of who I am. That's probably how I got brought into it too. Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's really great to know that like this fulfills a value you have, or something that like makes you more happy. So you mentioned that you kind of brought into mentorship just through somebody asking. Do they normally ask for mentorship for careers, or just like a specific task? What does mentorship look like to you in that sense?
Well, it's interesting. Like I've had a few different people approach me for different angles. So I would say one was maybe kind of out of a career interest. So just really asking about, okay, what have you been up to? How did you get here? How did you end up doing what you're doing? And how are you continuously growing? And that was maybe what spawned that person's interest in reaching out to me. Whereas another had kind of been following some of the philanthropy work that I was doing and reached out to me based on that. So I'm not really sure exactly kind of what the initial angle was. Like in somebody's initial approach, they had said, I've been watching you for a little while, which is a little bit of a weird thing to say, but it was not taken in a weird way in any way, shape, or form by me. And yeah, I guess I can't really speak to how or why people have reached out to me for this, but they have. And not everyone does. Obviously, there's a large majority of people who don't reach out to me for this. So
I think you also mentioned you're a people person, but you mentioned something about being involved in change. And does that help you? Do you find that helps you be a better leader too, being involved in mentorship programs and seeing or figuring out different strategies where you can help people develop?
yeah, and like I think you might also get a little bit more candor from somebody who you don't have like a direct reporting line relationship to, especially in the field that I work in. So it's actually we do things in the company that I work for, like peer-to-peer mentorship as well, where it'll be like a similar level of position to a similar level of position where you'll just meet and discuss some of the same challenges that you're having and try and overcome them. And I think that's really cool too. But yeah, I'm not really sure how to answer the question. It's a good one. It's definitely something that gives me a little bit of food for thought.
I think you mentioned a few things, like you get a lot of joy from just watching people grow, and like it does really sound like it helps you improve your own leadership style because you find different ways to help people reach different milestones that they might be interested in that you have experience with. And I think that sounds like, or to me, that's why I would be looking for a mentor. I know you've also been a mentor with the LSCDS mentorship program, which is beginning this winter term. And so I was wondering, for anybody interested in being a mentee, what would you tell them an advantage of joining such a program would be as a mentee?
Oh, access. So there was a lot of different people who from different backgrounds and different organizations who were a part of the program last year when I was a part of it, and like all different types of career paths that were chosen. So I think that getting access to some of the individuals that you otherwise might not have access to, and having that opportunity to ask questions and have those candid conversations is a really, really big benefit, because there's a lot of things in the working world that aren't necessarily exactly how you would think. So getting some of those kind of common misconceptions right off the bat out of the way, I think is a really big advantage, taking that step from academia into the working world.
And I think like within a program too, it's a lot like it's formalized. So there's less effort on your part in terms of finding a mentor.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you'll definitely be matched with somebody, right?
Yeah.
And that's nice too, to have that kind of reassurance that there will be somebody on the other side. I think what I would say though to mentees who are interested in, or anyone who's kind of interested in getting into the mentor or mentee relationship, is to just kind of be yourself. Like, just really bring yourself to the table and try not to be shy, as hard as it will be to ask some of the tough questions. Like, the worst answer you can possibly get is like, no, I'm not going to answer that. So when you frame it into that context, really, there's no question that's off the table. And a lot of folks have different mentorship styles, but you might find somebody who's willing to answer a question for you, or who might be willing to go a little bit further to help you, let's say, prepare for your dissertation or something along those lines. So, I mean, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And if you don't show up to the table, the answer is even more so no.
Okay, so that's a great like primary strategy. Just ask questions and show up. Do you have any other strategies that would be helpful for people trying to really move that relationship forward or make the most of it?
Yeah, definitely own it. So definitely, depending on who you're talking to and where the mentor kind of sits in their career, like, it might not be something that they're easily able to kind of keep tabs on. So definitely own being the person who's responsible for putting together the meetings and making sure that you come prepared for a conversation. Because a conversation can be very informal and can be very it can be very just there can be all kinds of topics that you talk about, but if you're dealing with a specific problem or something that you're trying to overcome, it's best to come prepared with that topic in mind. And then, even still, if you're really looking to understand more about that, give your mentor a heads up on what you wanted to talk about, so that your mentor can prepare a little bit in advance, or kind of rack their brain for some experiences that they've had in the past and maybe how they've overcome them. A lot of people like to story tell in these types of interactions, just to help say, okay, well, here's what happened to me, and here's how I overcame it, and here are the areas where I looked back on it and said, oh, that didn't go so well. So really giving them a heads up is definitely something that's helpful, at least to me as a mentor, and my mentees have been really good about kind of preparing me on what they want to talk about, and then setting expectations.
Okay, so like know what your goals are, set
Yeah.
expectations, and kind of be there. And I think like, so this is something I've struggled with too, where when you know what your goals are and you do communicate that, feeling like you're not meeting them with your mentor. What do you think about that part of it? If a mentee feels like they're not achieving what they wanted to achieve with their expectations, how does that make you feel as a mentor?
Yeah, I mean, that's an unfortunate situation for sure. I think that setting expectations early and often, so sometimes that comes down to too, like, the mentee doing a little bit of internal reflection. So what do you want to get out of this? Like, what does success in this relationship or in this friendship, or however you want to define it, look like to you? And then once the mentee has an answer for that, it's a lot easier to pursue towards the end goal. But if you're not so sure and you're going in, you might not quite get what you're looking for, because you might not even know what it is that you're looking for. So I guess step number one is just identifying it. So, hey, I'm looking for somebody that I can push questions off of, or I'm looking for somebody who can provide advice, or I'm looking for somebody who can connect me with the right people, or I'm looking for somebody who can introduce me to different areas of employment, let's say, because science is such a big field. Like, there's so many different options. I know that for me, coming out of school, like, I really had no idea what to do. And so it just depends on what you're looking for. So definitely step one is to identify that.
Interesting. Like, even talking to you, I didn't really realize those could be expectations or like goals you could set with a mentor. That's really great to know. That it can be like so practical.
Well, you get to write the script. Like, you get to write the script. And actually, that's not really just for a mentorship or mentee relationship. It's more just everything in life. Like, you get to decide what it is that you want to do. You get to decide how it is that you do it. You get to decide what type of leader you want to be. And I think oftentimes we get stuck into this kind of spot where we think that we should just be doing what other people are doing, but you really can write your own script in absolutely every area.
That's great advice, I think, because I think so often when you are on the other side, you always think about not wanting to overwhelm the other person with like what you need, and thinking like you're asking things that are too specific that they can't provide for you. And just what you're saying right now makes it seem like the types of things a mentor can be there for you are so vast, and it really does come down to just being there, like you said in the beginning, and asking and moving the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the worst thing that could happen? I can tell you, hey Maria, I actually don't know the answer to that question. And you're like, oh, okay, damn, my whole project has been ruined now. Not at all. No. But the other thing too is if I don't know, or if your mentor doesn't know, they might know somebody who they can connect you with, who you can kind of check that box with as well. So always being open to achieving results in different ways, I think is really important too.
That's amazing. So what do you think then, in retrospect, what do you think is the hardest part about maintaining that good relationship with the mentor and mentee, and how can you like kind of help develop that?
I think candor is really important. So being very open and honest with each other. I'm never shy if something comes up to say, hey, something's come up in this time slot. Can we push to this date? Like, just, you never want to go into these conversations stressed on either side, right? Like, it should never be a burden. It should always be something that you're looking forward to doing. So I think that going back to managing expectations, just communicating frequently as well with the mentor, with the mentee, is something that is really appreciated, I think, on both sides.
Do you find that is so communication that would be the hardest part, and just trying to maintain a level of communication that helps both parties like see where each person is and like how they're doing with like meeting whatever expectations they were set?
I guess it's not the hardest part. It's just probably one of the more important parts to kind of maintain that. And it can be a little awkward. It can be a little bit awkward. And maybe that's the hardest part, is kind of getting over that initial hump of talking to somebody that you don't necessarily know and being able to really be open and honest about what it is that you're looking for. That's probably the biggest challenge. I think also, depending on who you're talking to, there's so many variables in who could be a mentee and who could be a mentor. And like, you really want to find somebody that brings out the best in you. And you might not find them right away, and that's okay. But definitely continuing to pursue forward and trying to find somebody or multiple people who can provide you the advice that you're looking for, I think, is probably the hardest part. So getting it right would be a little bit difficult, but just keep trying and it'll come.
It really sounds like it's fit and experience, and trying to find somebody that has like the right personality fit for you maybe, and the right experience.
Of course. Yeah.
It's just like all relationships, I guess. You just got to keep on looking.
Absolutely.
And you just can't get like upset if it doesn't work out the first time, because it's difficult.
Yeah, I mean, you might have a question and you say, hey, mentor, here's my question. What would you do in this situation? And your mentor might answer you with something that you would absolutely never do. And not only that, but you think it's a terrible idea. Okay. And that's okay. It might just actually be not the greatest idea for you. Just because it's a mentor who's saying it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. So it's also about trying to figure out, okay, am I asking the right person the right question? So something that I've done, and I know that I had said earlier on that I don't have any like formal mentors. Like, I don't meet with somebody regularly to ask them questions or to see how I'm doing, or any of those kind of traditional roles that we talked about. But what I do instead is to kind of surround myself by experts. So throughout my life, I've kind of identified different people who are experts or advisors in certain areas. And I've kind of collected this group of people through observation mostly. So I'll actually watch, be just organically in some type of conversation and see how well they handle the situation, and think like, oh, this person is extraordinarily tactful. If I have a situation where I think that I could lean on somebody who's extraordinarily tactful for advice, maybe I'll reach out to them. similarly, if it's a technical question or if it's something related to, like, we've all got people who we look up to in our kind of technical roles, and I've seen this person really excel in a type of effort that I'm trying to push forward, I might reach out to them for that particular question. So it's all about, and your level of trust and your level of understanding with all of these people might be a little bit different. So it's about, for me, identifying, okay, here's this giant pool of experts that I've been able to surround myself with, and who's the right person to ask this question to? Who's going to give me the most honest answer? Who's going to, I don't like it when people sugarcoat, but I also don't like when people are mean. So I try to find the person who I think is going to best tailor their response based on those two things also. And just being open to knowing that not everyone's going to know everything and not everyone's going to be comfortable at answering everything. But keeping that group of experts relatively large. And honestly, it's a big group of people who are all specialized in different things too.
I think that's a great piece of advice, even when it comes to mentorship and careers, because like of course, there's like tactical advice you can get from people in careers you're interested in, but they're also there for a lot of the technical advice. And maybe you should reach out to your broader network, maybe somebody not in the career trajectory you're interested in, but could like has that skill that could provide you with a lot of advice. I think that's a really good point. And I think like when we do talk about mentorships and careers, it's overlooked. I don't always think about that.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, as you kind of progress through your career, it's important to realize you always have like your next goal in mind, or you always have like the next thing that you maybe want to do, or maybe you've reached your goal and now you want to enhance some other area of your life. Well, what got you here is not going to get you there. So trying to identify what skills you currently have versus the skills that you need to gain, and then being open and knowing that it might be somebody else out there who has these skills that you're looking for. So I'm in an organization now where the leaders are extraordinarily humble, and I've never really seen that before. And it's a really, really interesting thing to observe. And so I'm really trying to lean into understanding and seeing and watching them just walk through their leadership in such a way that leaves everyone in a position where they feel like they're involved. Like, it's just the amount of positive energy that comes out of that particular trait in leadership is something I hadn't even thought of because I hadn't seen it before.
Yeah, I think like you're referencing soft skills and transferable skills, like those can be learned everywhere. And especially like it's great to know that you can also learn it within your organization. And kind of speaking of which, so a lot of people listening to this podcast, and myself included, are interested in transitioning into industry. Do you have any tips on how to find mentors outside of academia and within different different career streams in industry?
Well, definitely once you're in the door, there's a lot of programs within different companies. I've only so far worked for Fortune 500 companies, which is maybe not the best example here, because I feel like a lot of those companies will have these structures in place. But if you go into your new job, seek out a mentorship program. So see whether or not they have something available. In many cases, the answer is going to be yes. And then if the answer is no, create something. So just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean it's not needed. It just means that somebody maybe hasn't taken the initiative to do it, or there's could be so many reasons why it doesn't exist. I think that identifying in terms of actually finding somebody to be a mentor, if it's not through more of a formal program, I would say somebody that you look up to for a lot of different reasons. So somebody who you've identified as somebody you might want to work towards being like, and use that as a starting point. But just know that not everyone is there's nobody in this world that's perfect, right? So everyone has good things about them and everyone has not so good things about them. And that's just part of what we do. That's just part of life and part of everybody and who they are. So I would say that would probably be my best advice. Going into a company, if you're already in, try and figure out whether or not they've got a program. Otherwise, try to start a program, or at least start one of those kinds of relationships with somebody who you're working with, who you look up to.
I think that's a really good point. When you joined any of the different companies you worked with, did you look for mentorship or professional development programs before you started? Or was that something, I think you mentioned you kind of like developed a lot of informal relationships?
Yeah, the first company that I worked for, I didn't really seek out those types of relationships. I was kind of just going in kind of a little bit of a know-it-all, to be honest. Like, I was like, I know everything. I don't need anyone to teach me anything. And that's really how I felt like for the first couple of years. It wasn't until I took a step back and realized, hey, like, you are not the smartest person in this room, that I started to look outside to try and develop myself internally. There was a few times where it was offered to me in my first couple of years, which is kind of an untraditional approach, but somebody had said, hey, I think so-and-so would be a great mentor to you. What do you think? And at the time, I couldn't figure out why they thought that would be a good pairing. And so I turned it down. I don't regret it. Because it wasn't something that I was working or aspiring to be. So I think that just being honest and open with yourself the whole time is really, really important. Further into my career, with the first place that I started working at, I started to see people exemplify behaviors that I wanted to learn how to do. And so at that point is when I started to kind of create this group of advisors or group of mentors that I would look up to or look to for advice. And again, it was pretty informal. So I didn't actually participate in any of the mentorship programs. But at one point we created a mentorship program for folks to grow. So we kind of had a little bit of input everywhere. This new job that I'm in, it has the peer-to-peer mentorship. So that is something that I'm now involved in. And then I'm looking more to find like female mentors, because I think it's really important. I think that men and women have different challenges going into the workplace, and you get to a certain point where you really need to learn from somebody who's already done it and who's been able to kind of overcome some of the barriers. And so lately, that's kind of what I've been looking for. I've been looking for more female leaders who I can kind of latch onto a little bit and understand, okay, you've already done all these things that I'm trying to accomplish. How did you do it? Where were these pain points for you? And so for the first time ever, I'm working for a female leader, which is amazing because I have like a mentor all the time. But then also there's a lot of different people within the organization too, who I've already been able to identify as potential mentors or advisors. So I'm going to be leaning a little bit more on, I guess, more formal structures than I previously did. But yeah, lots of opportunity regardless of the spot.
My last question would be, now that you formed a lot of different relationships, especially as a mentor, how do you find it's best to, and do you maintain these relationships long term? And how would you find, what do you find is like the best way to kind of do it?
I think it's going to be dependent on the person for sure. So I just left like one company, and I left a leader who I consider to be a mentor. Like, I'm like, this person is really incredible. Like, I really want to stay in their life. And so my tactic so far has I haven't actually like called him and been like, hey, can you be my mentor? And I'm not going to, but every so often when we run into one another, just kind of leaning on him for advice or listening to him and understanding kind of how he's overcome some of the challenges that he's had. I think that's probably going to be my approach with this one. Again, informal. It's always informal with me. And we'll see how it goes. We'll see if it is able to continue to flourish. I think that it will, but you never know. So I'll have to update you on that one too.
I think like you mentioned informal, but I think like the goal between formal is kind of go into informal, right? And like have that kind of sustain itself in an organic means, like you mentioned at the beginning, like having these relationships should be very organic, and it should ideally help you with your career growth, but also help you develop any other soft skills you're interested in.
No, absolutely. And look, and it doesn't have to be necessarily, like you had mentioned also, I think you picked up on kind of, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody within the same industry that you work in, or somebody that you met through work or through one of these formal mechanisms. Like if you've got somebody like in your family, for example, who has worked in a similar field, or who has accomplish some of the things that you're looking to accomplish, maybe in a different way or in a different application, lean on them as well, right? Like I think maybe just a little piece of advice, because I know that a lot of the folks who are listening maybe are looking in the near future to transition from academia into career or into industry. And I think that you need to keep your options open. I remember the time of when I had finished school and I had started my first job, and it being a long time and thinking, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing? What has taken place? I just wasted so much time going to school and now I can't even get a job. Be patient, be extremely patient, and lean on your soft skills. Lean on your soft skills. The world operates based on who you know and how you make people feel. It doesn't operate based on how well you can do your technical skill for the most part. It just to a certain degree,
That's
but
great.
yeah, just lean on how you make people feel, and just remember that, and everyone will always remember that about you, as if they left a conversation and they felt like inspired or creative, or they felt like they could take on any challenge. That's a really powerful feeling to leave a conversation with, versus if they felt drained, or if they felt like they were a burden, or if they felt like something negative. People will always, always, always remember the way you make them feel.
Thank you. I think like everything you've said has made hopefully listeners and myself feel more energized, and
Good.
like there is a lot to be gained from finding a mentor and talking to more people and learning about their experience. Again, thank you for taking your time to be with us today, and I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Of course. Thank you so much, Maria. I appreciate it. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you, you too. Thank you all for listening. It was great chatting with Gina and learning more about all the things mentorship can be. I hope you have a great day and looking forward to seeing you on our next episode.